Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me, I guess? Just want to make sure. All right. So yeah, first of all, I would like to thank the Society of Adventist Philosophers for granting me the privilege to present on the crucial and necessary topic of faith and reason, especially with regards to Father Eric Przywara's metaphysical contribution to this discussion. I am especially grateful considering Przywara, a Jesuit philosopher, theologian, poet, and priest, is now an obscure figure, although that was not always the case. He was an interlocutor with Karl Barth, the formidable Reformed Protestant Swiss theologian, who once described Przywara as the Goliath incarnate that Protestantism needed to reckon with. Przywara was also a mentor to St. Edith Stein, Father Hans Urs von Balthasar, and Father Karl Rahner, notable intellectuals and spiritual giants in their own right, and a contemporary of Martin Heidegger, postmodern philosopher. It is therefore my hope that by drawing from his singular metaphysical contribution, the Analogia Entis, and more specifically in relation to its application with the person of Jesus Christ, that I may demonstrate the continued fruitfulness of the Analogia Entis in unfolding the necessary, non-competing, and analogical relationship between faith and reason. Przywara's Analogia Entis aims to make three fundamental metaphysical moves, and these metaphysical moves will be the starting point to understand the metaphysical and theological significance of Jesus Christ. The first is to ground the proper relationship between the divine and the creaturely, so as to respect, recognize, and acknowledge the divine as divine and the creature as creature. The Fourth Lateran Council's declaration, one cannot note any similarity between creator and creature, however great, without being compelled to note an ever greater dissimilarity between them, is enlisted to ground Przywara's metaphysical project. This declaration recognizes an analogical relationship between God and creature while properly preserving the distinction of God and creature. The Analogia Entis establishes an oscillation between similitude and dissimilarity of God and creature that is a trademark feature of the Analogia Entis. Now, one must be careful, however, to note this oscillation is precisely to resist any temptation to turn the Analogia Entis into a neat formula that allows the creature to grasp the divine, as Barth feared. One must not forget the abyss that remains between God and creature, regardless of similarity, and it is the latter clause of the ever greater that is the constant reminder that preserves the sovereignty of God. The distinction recognized by the Analogia Entis is what allows divine and creaturely freedom to flourish and thrive without competing, nor ontologically diminishing each other. The next metaphysical move is recognizing the one concrete order between creation and redemption. Both creation and redemption comprise one single and concrete order that are both derived from God and gifts for God and from God. Recognizing the one concrete order of creation and redemption resists any wrangling over hypothetical orders of a pure nature that is wholly separate and untouched by the divine. We do not have recourse to another world comprised of pure nature or pure reason, apart from the concrete order between creation and redemption. Therefore, it would be futile to surgically excise grace from nature or faith from reason, for they are mutually co-implicated with one another. In the words of Gerard Manley Hopkins, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. The third metaphysical move of the Analogia Entis is to resist all forms of absolutization. Przywara argues that the desire for pure identity of essence and existence is the original sin of metaphysics. The metaphysical desire for pure identity, absolutization, foundation, and univocity are ultimately resisted and condemned as the creature grasping for that which belongs to God alone, identity of essence and existence. Przywara identifies the desire for this identity as the problematic root at the heart of every metaphysical system, from Parmenides on to modern philosophies. Every incomplete, denuded, oversimplified account of being is traced to the original sin of identity, univocity, and immediacy. As creature, what it means to be is to be ever in the suspended middle of analogy, in the dynamic and constant movement of existence toward essence. Moreover, it is precisely in the embrace of the creaturely movement of existence to essence where the creature is ready and open to divine revelation, and to be fully ready at the disposal of the divine in a posture termed as the potentia obedientialis. The Analogia Entis maintains this relational structure between essence and existence that keeps the creature open to the divine. Only when metaphysics embraces its creatureliness can it then be open to the divine, not when it usurps the divine by seeking identity, self-presence, and foundation. Now, in relation to the person of Jesus Christ, it is important to note that the analogia entes cannot be used as a metaphysical tool that predicts Jesus Christ as the natural fulfillment of the analogia entes. To do so would be to commit the same original sin of identity and presence that Przywara strived to avoid. The person of Christ, by virtue of his divinity, cannot be boxed in by metaphysical formula. Przywara is adamant that the analogia entes is not to prove revelation, rather it is to prepare the creature to encounter God's self-revelation. This is also why Przywara, while delineating aspects of Christ's humanity and divinity as what he calls the concrete analogia entes, is also keen to respect the mystery of the union of divine and creature. However, it is precisely in Christ that we have the ultimate intensity and concentration of the divine-creature relation. The analogia entes can be used to further explore the theological and philosophical implications deriving from the person of Jesus Christ because of its ability to properly situate the relationship between God and creature. The same way the analogia entes preserves the distinction between God and creature, likewise the divine and human natures of Christ remain distinct. In his early work, Polarity, Przywara carefully traces what he terms, quote unquote, that most difficult aspect of Catholicism, namely the incarnation. For Przywara's early thought in Polarity, the analogia entes with regards to the incarnation properly grounds the relationship between God and creature. He argues that the analogia entes offers a full understanding of, and I quote, true incarnation cosmos, including body and spirit, community and individual, end quote, because the incarnation reveals the openness of all created nature to an encounter with the divine. The analogia entes opens the possibility to understand all creation as a window into the being of God, quote, in the likeness which transcends all likeness, end quote. The incarnation, therefore, reveals the openness of creation to be used by God and is echoed by Blessed Virgin Mary's Fiat Mihi. The analogia entes, therefore, is not for the sake of capturing God in the metaphysical system, but to prepare the creature to adopt a posture of, quote, a reverent looking towards God as to the one whose self-abnegation with creation already as such owes its existence, end quote. As a result, he understands the incarnation not as approximation or contradiction, but, quote, as the crown of the process of the self-abnegation of God, end quote. For Przywara, then, the incarnation is the crown of the creation that exists as a result of movement from God hitherward, while ever being open to an encounter with God. The analogia entes understands the incarnation as the ultimate fulfillment of creation in God. In his later work, or collection of works in the analogia entes, he further expands on the metaphysical implications of Christ qua analogia entes. He locates the person of Christ as the main site of the encounter between Christianity and metaphysics. Christ is Christianity's answer to the metaphysical question, quid est Deus, what is God? He is the mysterious union of the ever greater dissimilar orders of God and creature. Przywara observes, quote, everything in this Christ in whom one sees God is completely man in flesh and blood and spirit, according to the common schema of man, end quote. He continues to describe Christ as completely the presence of God, even to the point of one's hearing, seeing, and touching the God whom one cannot see, who dwells in unapproachable light. He sums up Christ as the paradox of paradoxes. He declares that, quote, God is Christ in something above and beyond even paradox. This paradox beyond paradox reaches its pinnacle on the cross, where the glory of God radiates through the seeming abyss of God-forsakenness. Thus, it is at the cross where the ever greater dissimilarity finds its fullest expression, divine glory and divine foolishness. Przywara says as much, where Christianity's encounter with metaphysics reveals the supreme inconceivability of God in the incarnation and the crucifixion. The cross reveals the scandal and foolishness of everything that can be imagined or conceived under the title of God. Nothing in metaphysics can conceive of a God who journeys into the God-forsakenness of the cross. Metaphysics does not have a prior measure which can make sense of a God that pours himself out in love in the incarnation and the cross. Przywara argues that it is not possible to quote, resolve the contradiction in regard to the divine as such in such a way that turns this contradiction into a metaphysicum proper to God himself, end quote. There is no balancing of a God of light and God of darkness to domesticate the scandal and folly of the cross. Metaphysics can only kneel in awe and wonder at the cross, and it is precisely in the creaturely metaphysical posture facilitated by the analogia entis that makes the analogia entis most suitable to gratefully receive the scandalous aspect of divine revelation. Thus, the cross serves as a sort of litmus test for metaphysics to stay true to its creaturely designation. Any attempt to make sense of the crucified God through appeal to univocal knowledge or to what he called a comprehensible dialectic is to commit the original sin to know as God knows and to be like God. Przywara is only prepared to affirm, quote, that it is precisely in the unresolved and irresoluble mysterium crucis, in the crucified Christ, that we see the logos, an icon and mirror, and reflection and image and appearance and exegesis of the God whom no one has ever seen or can see, end quote. To sum up, it is the unseen God in the seen Christ. However, to stop at the crucifixion would potentially lead to the false security of identifying God and creature in the finite ultimacy of death. If the ultimate revelation of God is in the crucifixion, then it would be akin to identifying God univocally with the creaturely fate of death. Przywara would therefore threaten to surrender mystery to univocity in a manner more radical than Nietzsche's proclamation, God is dead. One must therefore proceed further than Przywara into the mystery of Christ's life, more specifically into the silence of Holy Saturday. Here, the analogia entis goes further into the abyss than even the most ardent atheist. Where metaphysics of absence ultimately seeks the foundation and presence in the absolutization of absence, the analogia entis resists the temptation of absolutizing absence in favor of the tension of the scandal of a God who goes all the way into the abyss of tomb, death, and Hades itself. If the Passion of Christ is a kind of metaphysical stretching of the analogia entis, Holy Saturday takes the analogia entis to its fullest limits of the ever greater dissimilarity, for it is in Holy Saturday where the finitude of creation appears to converge with the infinity of God in the abyss of death. And yet, where the infinite divine life of the second person of the Trinity meets the ultimate fate of all finite created life, the ever greater dissimilarity breaks through once more to flood the ultimacy of death with divine life, life that overwhelms the finitude of death with divine plenitude, and bubbles over into the plundering of Hades with the release of the holy souls, and ultimately with the resurrection of Christ himself. Thus, where the divine life threatens to be overcome by the ultimate fate of finitude, the ultimate word of the ever greater dissimilarity prevails and pierces the abyss with a simultaneous radiance and mystery of divine love and eternal life. The analogia entis also provides the most capacious metaphysical posture to embrace the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. Considering the analogia entis as the metaphysical principle that outlines the movement of God hitherward and the God that sustains all creation, with the counterpoint of a creation that is ever open to fulfillment by God and an encounter with God, then the Eucharist also provides the perfect backdrop for this movement of God towards creation and creation towards God. The bread and wine are the embodiments of the cosmos, nature, and human labor taken up into the divine life and united perfectly with Jesus Christ. The Eucharist is where God's glory on the cross radiates once more through the created order without destroying the created order. The created order itself remains both present and distinct from the divine nature in the Eucharist itself. Once more, any similarity between the created order and God is taken up into the abyss of the ever greater dissimilarity. Moreover, what appears to be the absurd reduction of God into creation only proves to be the ever greater dissimilarity of a God who is infinitely beyond comprehension, who ventures forth into the seemingly most banal and common appearance of bread and wine to simultaneously veil and unveil the divine life, the divine self outpouring in the love that forever exceeds human comprehension. Now, with regards to Protestant notions treating the Eucharist as purely symbolic, Przywara would perhaps critique the idea of creation as fully closed off from the possibility of being taken up into the divine. To foreclose the possibility of the real presence altogether would be an extension of denying any relationship between God and creation outside of the moment of creation. The analogia entis, therefore, provides a tantalizing prospect of greater rapprochement, at least between the East and the West, with regards to a sacramental worldview of creation opening up to God, and potentially opens up greater points of convergence as well between Protestants and Catholics. To conclude, Przywara's singular contribution of the analogia entis continues to be a rich resource for the dialogue between faith and reason. This paper, which enlists him for the purposes of unfolding the significance of the person of Jesus Christ, offers one such example. There is further potential yet for the analogia entis to enlighten the conversation between Christianity and with postmodern philosophical systems such as Heidegger's. For example, there are opportunities to explore the abyss of the ever greater dissimilarity that governs the relationship between creator and creature, together with Heidegger's own searching for the sake of searching. It is out of the desire to avoid what von Balthasar terms dilettantism that I've decided to save any comparisons with Heidegger for another time. But this is only to show that there is more yet that can be studied to unfold the richness of Przywara's metaphysics, especially because it is a feature of the analogia entis to resist the kind of identity and presence that postmodern philosophies also reject. As Rahner once described Przywara, the quote, "The whole Przywara, especially the late Przywara, is yet to come. He stands at a place in the road that many in the church have yet to get past," end quote. By renewed engagement with the ever-capacious Przywara, perhaps we who have come after will finally arrive where he has been waiting for us all along. Thank you.
So I wonder if you would be willing to comment further on the significance of incomprehensibility with respect to the confidence that we ever
I'm sorry, your question, you're cutting off. I got the point of comprehensibility and ever dissimilar. I'm sorry.
We lost you there.
Start again. Go ahead.
Okay. So my we the appearance of the to be kind of the end point sets the notion of the divine presence in creation as an ever greater dissimilarity in similarity. And it would seem that the is a greater dissimilarity, nevertheless have embodied in them a confidence actually present, whether or not one should not be an identity in a paper, to simply identify, and Jesus might be a problem here in refusing to identify, but to simply identify the divine with any event in creation doesn't, it seems to me, lead to a conclusion of incomprehensibility. So I wondered if you could talk about whether your use of incomprehensibility, which I'm quite sure is faithful to Przywara, whether or not that tends to dissolve the idea that there is some similarity even in the ever greater dissimilarity.
Yeah, well, from what I said of Przywara, because creation is a gift from God itself, therefore creation already has this openness to God, and so there are convergences, but precisely in those points of convergences, there are that there is that ever greater dissimilarity that eludes, and so this need to respect the incomprehensibility within the recognition of any similarity between creation and God.
But I could put the question this way. I think there are two ways to understand the term incomprehensible. One way says, I have no idea what you're saying. The other says, I understand what you're saying, and I think you're saying to me that the best you can do is to be less than fully comprehensive.
Well, I would propose for Przywara it's more of the openness to mystery and recognizing sort of the transcendence of God. God is wholly other, and despite the wholly otherness of God, God is created, especially humanity in God's image. Therefore, there is that similitude. But again, the need to respect the distance that abyss. And that's what in terms of like the ever greater dissimilarity.
Anyway, I'd like to thank you for bringing Przywara to this group's attention.
Any comments, questions?
Yeah, I also want to thank you for the paper. I guess I'm reflecting on the explanation you're providing in light of the conversation we just had with the Chuck's paper. And I'm wondering if Przywara addresses at all any connections between these metaphysical ideas and ethical actions or postures in the world. So in other words, like it seems like you have like this very beautiful vision of divine love and co-suffering and these kinds of things. Does he draw out like implications of this for ethics at all?
I suppose he was more of a metaphysical thinker, but Philip John Paul Gonzalez, who in his book Reimagining the Analogia Entities, he draws ethical implications from Przywara's, more precisely from his creaturely metaphysics, the importance of the creature to remain creaturely and to respect that difference between creature and divine. So it is in the works that appropriate Przywara's analogia entities, I think, that draw out the ethical implications further. And so yeah, more needs to that's why more needs to be done to continue mining, I guess, the analogia entities for its full metaphysical and ethical implications.
Thank you.